Welcome back to Matt's Strats. This is Matt's Strats number 2, where I go over strategy tips for you guys in intermediate and advanced level games. This is an OTB game played in Germany between two players rated in the 1600s. And in this position, black just castled. And what I'd like you to do here is think about, number 1, what's the eval in this position? Number 2, what are the imbalances that lead to that evaluation? And number 3, what is the best move in the position? And to do that, you'll want to think about a few different candidate moves. So go ahead and pause the video here if you would like. Think through all that and put a note in the comments. What do you think the eval is and what do you think the best move is? And I'll give you a few seconds to pause the video here if you would like to. And then I'm going to go through and give you guys the solution. All right. So the answer is pawn to c4. This is a great move for white. This is expanding in the center, but the next thing we have to do is evaluate the capture. After d takes c4, do we want to take with the b pawn or the bishop? And this is actually a huge difference. So if you calculated this out on the previous move, good job for you. And if you did not calculate that out on the previous move, this is a chance for you to again pause the video and run through that same exercise, because it's important to know if you thought of c4, but if you didn't think of which way to recapture back, it's very important to have that figured out before you play c4 in a game. So pause the video here if you did not figure that out. We're going to go through the answer now. Let's first look at bishop takes c4. This move was played in the game, and the eval in this position is minus 1.5. So black has a 1.5 pawn advantage. And the reason that this is a 1.5 pawn advantage is because the weakest pawn on the board is this pawn on d4, and black has the bishop pair. We see the two bishops for black, white has a bishop and knight. So if you combine those two things together, black has an advantage. The full 1.5 is probably a combination of those two factors, plus maybe the fact that black could put an additional pressure on this knight on f3. But essentially, white's probably going to lose this pawn on d4 soon, in addition to black having the bishop pair and more active pieces. So if you thought c4 was the best answer, but you wanted to follow up with bishop takes c4 played in the game, this will be very instructive for you. So let's go back to this position, and now let's look at the stronger move, b takes c4. This is the correct decision by white, and so hopefully you had this calculated out. These are called hanging pawns, the pawns on c4 and d4. They're connected to each other, and there's no pawns for white on the sides. There's no e pawn and no b pawn. So these are called hanging pawns. And even though black has the bishop pair still, the hanging pawns do a great job controlling all of the space in the center. So sometimes with hanging pawns, they can be a weakness, sometimes they can be a strength, but in this case, right now they're a strength for white. And usually when you're playing against hanging pawns, so if you're playing black in this position, the best strategy is to get one of these pawns to advance forward so you can blockade the pawns on the squares in front of them. But in this case, there's no easy way for black to encourage one of the white pawns to move forward. So here we're looking at a very close to equal position. And let's show what can happen after black plays queen to a5. I should note here, knight takes d4 was not available for black. If knight takes d4 trying to win a pawn, there's knight takes, queen takes, and bishop takes h7 check, winning the queen on the next move. So if black plays queen to a5 here, in this position, white can play knight b to d2. And here we see the eval is close to equal. Bishop pair for black, strong hanging pawns for white. White gets that extra space advantage in the center, like we talked about. Close to equal. So now let's go back to bishop takes c4, and let's see what happened in the game. Let's see how this unfolded. Bishop to g4 was played by black. And here you can actually feel how uncomfortable this is getting for white already with the knight on f3 pinned. After bishop to e2, bishop takes, knight takes d4, white actually fell apart pretty quickly. Knight takes, queen takes, and here there was this cool tactic by black. Bishop takes h2 check, queen d6, and winning the knight. Black is up 2 pawns in a rook and pawn endgame, and the position is very quickly falling apart for white. So that's your Math Strats video for the day. This is talking about pawns in the center, talking a little bit about hanging pawns, and in this position it was good for white to play c4 and accept those hanging pawns. In this position you don't want to play a move like knight to c3. Here we have an eval of minus 0.7 because we see there's a backward pawn on c2 and it's not connected to the d4 pawn. Really in this position you don't want to play white because of the ugly pawn structure, and in this case black will very easily be able to defend d5, and d4 will be the weakest pawn on the board. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed this Math Strats number 2, and keep posting your comments. I really like seeing what you guys guess for evals. Let me know what you thought of this position too, and stay tuned for Math Strats number 3. Thanks for watching.